Yo, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to the second ever episode of the Trophy Case Podcast. I'm your host, Anthony Pucci, and it's been a minute since I hopped on here with you guys. It's been a little bit over a month. Obviously, since then, a lot of stuff has changed, a lot of new stories to talk about. Uh, NFL free agency has been absolutely wild. Our Eagles not doing too hot, but we'll hop into that a little bit later. And Selection Sunday was yesterday, so March Madness coming up has everybody really excited. And yeah. So the most recent news at the time of this recording is that the Bengals signed both Jamar Chase and T. Higgins to new contracts. Chase gets 4 years over 160 million. Higgins also gets 4 years, 115 million. Uh, Obviously, it's a lot. It's a lot of money to pay for two wide receivers, especially after the year the Bengals just had. I think it's a very interesting move. I mean, obviously, I don't get paid to make these types of decisions, but if it was up to me, I don't think it's the right call. I think that defense last year, as everybody knows, was atrocious. And I understand that they're now trying to keep Trey Hendrickson apparently because their asking price was too crazy. But I don't understand how you're going to pay everybody. I mean, if Burrow's making all this money now, Chase, now Higgins, now Hendrickson, they're kind of following the Cowboys model. I think it's where you pay a lot of money wrapped up in 3 or 4 players. The Cowboys have a lot of their money wrapped up in Dak, CD, and Micah whenever he gets his payday. But I personally just don't think it's a good way to run a team. Um, sure, Joe Burrow had a great year last year. I think it's a little bit overrated. I think people trying to mention him in MVP talks and stuff like that. I mean, I don't agree with that at all personally. How are you going to miss the playoffs in an expanded format and try to claim that you're the MVP? I understand, obviously, like we talked about, that defense isn't great. They're going to have to try and crush the draft, and they're hoping that their new defensive coordinator from Notre Dame, what's his name? One second. Al Golden. They're hoping their new defensive coordinator, Al Golden from Notre Dame, can kind of have the Vic Fangio effect like the Eagles had. I'm telling you right now, it's not going to be the same. Obviously, making the transition from college to NFL shakes up the game a little bit. I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm not saying he'll be bad. I mean, they kind of have to be better than they were last year because it doesn't really get much worse than that. But again, I just don't really know what the Bengals' plan is here. I understand that they still have the draft. They still have some free agency moves left to make potentially, but the Bengals are known for being a frugal franchise. And unless they absolutely crush the draft like the Eagles did last year with Jalix Hunt, obviously Cooper DeJean, Quinyon Mitchell, all those types of guys, I just don't see how the Bengals can really revamp this team too much. And I just think you're going to get the same thing that happened last year, just again with an arguably worse defense if Hendrickson leaves. And I don't know. I just don't think it's the best way to build a team. Once again, I think the Bengals are kind of just floating in kind of mediocrity. And I mean, it's going to be interesting to see. Obviously, Burrow's one of the best quarterbacks in the league. Chase, one of the best receivers in the league. Higgins, one of the best number twos in the league. But again, it's a very interesting way to build a team, and I don't think it's going to work out. But we'll just have to see how the next season unfolds. Next, I know we don't talk a lot of Jets on the show, and nor do I intend to talk too much more Jets. But Justin Fields signs a new contract with the New York Jets, 2 years, $40 million, $30 million guaranteed. Um, Again, do I think Justin Fields is necessarily the future for the Jets? I'm not sure. I think it'll definitely be an upgrade from Aaron Rodgers. I think a lot of the people trying to use Rodgers' touchdown to interception ratio last season as a defense of him just simply wasn't really watching the games. If you watched Jets football at any point last year, any of those games, even though they were painful to watch, it was very clear that Rodgers was almost protecting that stat, and he doesn't take shots down the field, even though that's been a knock on him for years. But again, I just don't think he was nearly as good as that one particular stat indicates. And I think now with Rodgers more likely than not out the door and it's Fields' team, I think that's going to give a huge boost to the Jets, honestly, whether it's locker room wise or even just on the field. I think it's going to benefit them a lot not to have the quarterback be the main story 24/7 all the time. Obviously, Rodgers being in New York, he kind of runs the media. He runs the show. It's all Rodgers or nothing, basically. And obviously, Fields isn't coming in with that pedigree or really that attitude. So I think overall it will be good for the team, even if it doesn't show right away. I think he'll get clicking with Garrett Wilson like they did in college. Obviously, you still have Breece Hall there if he can stay healthy. I don't think the Jets are going to make any noise really, but I think they're heading in the right direction. I think they had to pull the plug on the Aaron Rodgers business. Obviously, the first year he gets hurt, that doesn't go the way you want it to. And then last year was just another disaster. But again, it's going to be very interesting to see what the Jets do in the draft this year. There's a lot of different directions they could go. I'm leaning more towards Tyler Warren, to be honest, if he doesn't get picked by the Colts. But I think that could be really interesting to try and boost that offense even more with now you have the running threat of Fields, again, Breece Hall, Garrett Wilson, and now you add Tyler Warren into the mix. I'm not saying they would be like a top 5 offense in the league, but it would definitely make them more exciting and more viable. Again, you got to hope that Sauce Gardner bounces back after a down year last year and some of those players play better. But again, through the draft and with some free agency signings, they could definitely be decent. Do I think they're a real contender for the AFC East? No. Obviously, the Bills, that's their division. And a lot of people are high on the Patriots. They spent a lot of money. Shout out Milton Williams, Eagles legend. They signed Mac Hollins and a couple other smaller pieces. But I don't know. It depends. It also depends if they get Travis Hunter in the draft this year. That'll boost obviously their defense and offense for Drake May. But yeah, I don't think the Patriots are done yet. So I don't know. I think it's going to be a battle for second and third. And I haven't even mentioned the Dolphins. Used to be a big Tua fan, but they don't seem to be doing it right down there either. We just talked about the Bengals. They're kind of doing the same path as the Bengals where they're paying the quarterback, they're paying the receiver, they're now paying another receiver. Again, we just have seen that before. It doesn't have the best past history. I don't know how that'll shake out for the Dolphins. Obviously, Tua's health is a concern. Tyreek, he's had a lot of turmoil. Earlier, a couple months ago, or a month or two ago, he wanted to trade. Now he doesn't want to trade. He's committed to Miami. So either way, I don't think it makes that much of a difference, but I think the Jets are kind of competing for like the third spot in the AFC East, depending on what the Patriots do. But again, I could see them going up as high as 2 if Fields clicks and he clicks with Garrett Wilson and they do well in the draft. But yeah, that's all I have on the Jets. Next, we'll hop into the more inferior team in the state of Pennsylvania, the Pittsburgh Steelers. Obviously, they've vultured a couple people from our Philadelphia Eagles. They've taken Kenneth Gainwell and Slay now. Other notable things the Steelers did: Mason Rudolph, 2-year contract. That shouldn't even been brought up. Brought our boy Kenneth Gainwell, 1 year, almost $2 million deal. Again, I think he'll be a solid running back. I'm not sure if Kenny's more of a 1 or a 2, but he's been great in his time in Philadelphia as a 2, and I think he deserved his shot to try and, you know what I mean, go make his name for himself as an RB1. Obviously, the most noisy move they made was the DK Metcalf trade for the 2025 second-round pick, and they signed him to a 4-year, $132 million extension. It's definitely a very interesting play once again. DK said he wanted to go to a contender and a place that was warm, and then he went to neither in Pittsburgh. So that's kind of funny. It's funny how stuff changes once you get the bag, obviously. But it was interesting that he didn't sign with the Patriots, just declined that, went to Pittsburgh. But it's going to be very interesting to see him and the duo of Pickens, if Pickens does decide to stay, or if the Steelers do decide to keep him, rather, should I say. But again, they're very similar receivers. They're really downfield threats more than anything else. They don't, if anything, the knock on them is like the short to intermediate range, but nobody doubts how good they are down the field. But it's going to be interesting to see who they pair them up with, because right now it's looking like Russell Wilson, who obviously isn't throwing the moon balls like he used to, or if they get Aaron Rodgers, that's just even more of a disaster. But obviously, at least they're moving in the right direction. They're making moves, which is better than a lot of teams can say. They get Darius Slay on a 1-year, $10 million deal. They get Donald Parham from the Chargers, decent pickup. But yeah, overall, I think the Steelers are just kind of stuck in purgatory. It's going to be another slightly above winning season for the Steelers with Mike Tomlin, just to get first round in the playoffs if they make it. The Steelers making moves, but is it really going to change or move anything? I'm not convinced. Next, I just kind of want to take a look at the overall landscape of the NFC East, starting with the worst team. The Cowboys, they signed 2 running backs this year, which obviously is decent move after how pitiful their running game was last year with Rico. No offense to Rico, but they signed Miles Sanders to a 1-year. Shout out the Eagles legend from a couple years ago. He kind of never really found his footing in Carolina. Whether that's a Carolina problem or a Miles Sanders problem kind of remains to be seen. I still think Miles has something left in the tank, but when he was in Philadelphia, he wasn't ever really a game breaker, and I am assuming it's going to stay the same like that in Dallas. They also signed Javonte Williams, though, to a 1-year, $3 million deal. A couple years ago when Javonte was a rookie, I was a huge fan of him. I think he had a lot of potential. These past couple years obviously haven't worked out the way Javonte would have intended. He's been injured a decent amount, and he's kind of been in a running back committee in Denver. So I'm not sure how that's going to play out. I think at one point he definitely had potential to be a pretty good running back in this league. But again, we're going to have to see how that shakes out. Signed Paris Campbell from the Eagles. Not too concerned about that. He was like our wide receiver 4. They signed Osa Odighizuwa, who was actually like one of their best players on defense. If you didn't watch too many Cowboys games, I don't blame you. I don't watch the Cowboys either. But I mean, he's a great player. 4 years, $80 million is a little rich for my taste, but as long as Jerry gets out that checkbook and starts paying teams or starts paying players that I'm not a big fan of, I'm cool with that. Kyrie Elam, he was horrible for the Bills. A couple years ago as a draft prospect, he was pretty highly touted, and a lot of people thought he could really be something in this league. But you saw in that playoff game, as soon as he came out of as soon as the Bills starting cornerback came out of the game, they were targeting him and picking on him for the rest of the game. He's just not that good at this point. I think that's fair to say. Maybe he'll rejuvenate his career in Dallas, but that still remains to be seen. I'm not a big fan of that pickup at all. Solomon Thomas, that would have been notable 6 years ago. Nobody really cares. Next, we'll move on to the Giants. They re-signed Tommy DeVito. That's not even noteworthy. It's going to be interesting to see what the Giants do if they do go QB, which I think they should do way over acquire Aaron Rodgers. I think that would honestly be a disaster. Even though I do think the Rodgers and Malik Neighbors duo could be pretty good and pretty lethal, I just think overall that's just you're asking for the same thing that happened in New York all over again. Any other notable thing? Oh, the Giants signed Javon Holland, 3 years, $45 million from the Dolphins. I was a huge fan of Javon Holland in college and in Miami. I think he's one of the more underrated defensive players and one of the most underrated safeties in the league. So got to give credit where that's due. That's definitely a good pickup. And a lot of the other stuff they have isn't really too notable. In terms of the Commanders, obviously they made that trade for Deebo Samuel. Am I scared by that? No, not whatsoever. I think that's a more scary player in name more than actually like on the field and production wise. I think Deebo's best years are kind of behind him. I think that main year where he really popped off as a running back and receiver took a lot of hits and has continued to take a lot of hits. So obviously that just type of wear and tear is going to wear on you. And you've really seen that the past like year or two with Deebo. He's just not really the same player. Maybe he gets a new step of life now with Jayden Daniels, obviously, but does that really faze me? No. They bring back Zach Ertz. Obviously, Zach Ertz is still really solid, honestly. Zach Ertz has been doing it for a long time. He was kind of Daniel's safety blanket at a couple times last year. I mean, he still looks good at his age. They trade for Laremy Tunsil, which obviously is a pretty big deal. Shout out gas mask Laremy Tunsil, but he's obviously moved past that from draft night a long time ago, and he's really become one of the best left tackles in the league. I'm not too worried about that. Again, it's definitely a good pickup for the Commanders. They re-signed Bobby Wagner. Again, that doesn't really faze me. Nothing else too much. They re-signed their punter, their kicker. All just overall solid stuff. And then move on to the Eagles. Obviously, Eagles have lost a lot of players this free agency. Again, am I worried? No, just because you got to trust in Howie and you got to trust in what he's doing. He's given us no reason not to trust him. And at the end of the day, this is what you have to expect. This is the price that comes with being the champion. Obviously, Slay leaves, Oren Burks leaves, CJ gets traded. Who else am I missing? I know there's other people I'm missing, but obviously Milton Williams, Josh Sweat. I don't know. Obviously, it sucks. Those guys hold a really special place in all of our hearts here in Philadelphia just because of how great last year went and how dominant that Super Bowl was. But I don't think it's unreplaceable. Again, and Howie said it's going to be a lot of young players playing, and I feel like that's all right. That's the way you got to do it. It's going to be really interesting to see what they do in the draft again, to see if they go O-line to maybe get Lane Johnson's replacement or D-line to try and fill in some of those Josh Sweat, Milton Williams holes. Or now, obviously, with the GJ trade, going to have to look for a safety. Do you look at Malachi Starks? I really think so. I think he'd be a great fit. But other than that, the Kenny Pickett DTR trade, I mean, who cares? Saquon Barkley gets his 2-year extension a little bit early. I saw a lot of people criticizing that, saying, why would you pay him? Why would you re-up him like that? I mean, after the year Saquon had and just after the year the Eagles had and everything, dude absolutely deserves it. He shouldn't be worried about money or anything. And I think it's good to get out ahead of that now. So there's no stories of Saquon wants more money or any of this or any of that. And I'm not saying he's that type of person, but it's great to get out ahead of that and not have that type of stuff percolating in the locker room because, again, it's just added noise. They signed A.J. Dillon. I used to love A.J. Dillon a couple years ago when he was backing up Aaron Jones in Green Bay. Obviously, huge quads, biggest quad duo ever, really, as for all that's worth. But again, I think he'll be a really solid 2. We'll definitely miss Kenneth Gainwell. But I think the combination of Saquon, A.J. Dillon, Will Shipley, we'll definitely be fine with that. Harrison Bryant, not really notable. They just extended Lane Johnson for 1 more year. So shout out to Big Lane. Shout out to Oklahoma in the back, our boy Lane and Jalen Hurts. Other than that, though, Kenyon Green, the Eagles get out of the Texans trade for GJ rather. He was a first-round pick a couple years ago. Does it say it here? No, it doesn't. But he was a first-round pick a couple years ago. And if anybody was known as like a bust or a little bit underwhelming and can revive their career, it's going to be in Philadelphia with Jeff Stoutland. Look at what happened with Mekhi Becton. Again, I'm really upset we didn't bring Becton back. I was hoping Howie was going to kind of go Becton and Bond in free agency to bring them back. Everybody else I was kind of okay with / expecting to lose. But I'm not going to lie, losing Mekhi Becton hurts a lot. Hopefully, with Jeff Stoutland's great coaching and this great culture here, he can really turn it to be something. Eagles signed Josh Uche from the Chiefs. Again, does that really move me? Not too much. He's kind of their Josh Sweat hybrid edge rusher replacement. Zach Bond obviously gets brought back 3 years, $51 million. That's huge. We also signed Adoree Jackson. Should be solid. Maybe a nickel because, again, lost Isaiah Rodgers too. So, again, the Eagles are really going to rely on a lot of young players this year. Does that worry me? No. I think Quinyon's ready. Coop is ready. Reed Blankenship's not super young, but I think he's ready. I think some of these younger guys like Keely Ringo, Eli Ricks, Sidney Brown, I think they're ready to go, and they kind of have to be. That's what the team's expecting. We're not expecting to take a step back this year. We're ready to compete and try and get another Super Bowl again. And I think Howie's setting that up. Again, it's going to be really interesting to see what we do in the draft. I'm kind of hoping for either O-line or safety. I think there's a lot of good edge rushers in this class. I think you can get that a little bit later. But again, whatever Howie does, you got to just trust because he's given us no reason to. But yeah, so that's the NFC East. Next, I just kind of want to take some time to talk about other stuff happening around the league. Not too much other crazy stuff going on. For example, I'm just scrolling through here. Broncos, they signed Talanoa Hufanga, 3-year, $45 million deal. Obviously, Hufanga got hurt last year, but he's been a really good player for the 49ers this past couple of years whenever he's healthy. He was a really good mid-round pick for them. So, again, it's going to be interesting to see what the Broncos do with Justin Simmons. I've heard some Eagles rumors there, even though I'm not a huge fan of that. But, again, that's a good pickup for them. Evan Ingram, decent, 2 years, $23 million. And I didn't even mention they got Dre Greenlaw too. So it's looking like the Denver 49ers over there. But overall, solid free agency, I would say. Chiefs, sign Elijah Mitchell, solid. Bring back Hollywood Brown, bring back Juju. Nothing too crazy from them either. They're kind of just expecting, obviously, to have Patrick Mahomes be Patrick Mahomes and have that defense be as good as it has been the past couple of years, as that's kind of their winning formula. Raiders signed Geno Smith in a very interesting trade. I thought this kind of shakes up everything a lot for the draft. Again, what are the Raiders going to do? Are they going Ashton Jeanty? Are they going even Tyler Warren? Are they still going quarterback? It really makes things interesting. I'm not sure. They give up 23rd round pick for Geno, give him a new deal. Do I agree with that? Not particularly. I think if anything, you should have had a quarterback like that, a veteran quarterback, be your bridge, and then you draft either Shador or whoever you seem fit maybe a little bit later to kind of be your next generation QB. Because at this point, I mean, we all know what Geno is. He's obviously a decent enough quarterback, but is he your quarterback of the future? I'm not so sure. Raiders also signed Jeremy Chin. I was a huge Jeremy Chin in Carolina. I think he's a really solid player. They also re-signed Max Crosby, 3 years, $106.5 million. These numbers getting thrown around nowadays are just crazy. Chargers sticking with the AFC East. They get Najee Harris. Again, that doesn't really move the needle too much for them, I'd say. I was a big fan of J.K. Dobbins last year, and he was having a really good year with the Chargers until he got hurt, which seems to be the story of his career. Unfortunately, they also bring back Mike Williams. Shout out Mike Williams, one of the jump ball goats this past decade. Nice to see him back in LA for sure. Other than that, nothing too. Oh, Mekhi Becton, I forgot to even mention. Yeah, so when the Eagles lost Mekhi Becton, he ends up signing with the Chargers for 2 years, $20 million. I'm not gonna lie, I thought that'd be something that the Eagles could get done. I understand that Howie's kind of pushing all the money down the line a little bit so we can compete now. So I understand you can't pay everybody, but I was really hoping we were going to keep Becton. I think he's a great player and he'll be great for the Chargers over there. Moving on to the next NFC North. Bears obviously make some big offensive line additions for Caleb. That's going to help Caleb obviously a bunch. And then if they decide to go running back in the draft or at any point, or even if they don't go running back, just having that bolster the offensive line is going to be huge for them. They also signed Zaccheaus, nothing too crazy. The two offensive line, like I mentioned, Jonah Jackson, Joe Thuney, really solid, good signings. Grady Jarrett, 3 years, $43.5 million. I missed that. That's very interesting. I think Grady Jarrett used to be a great player at one point in Atlanta. Again, I think those days are kind of behind him, but more help, more depth on the D-line is never a bad thing. Lions bring back Tim Patrick. Nothing really else too crazy. Bring in DJ Reed. He's really solid player. That's a good pickup. Other than that, nothing too crazy. Packers really didn't do anything. Sign corner, linebacker, offensive guard, nothing crazy. Vikings bring back Aaron Jones. They also signed Jordan Mason, who was really solid for the 49ers in McCaffrey's absence and when they kind of were going through that gauntlet of running backs last year. Jordan Mason's always been really solid. Also signed Jonathan Allen, 3 years, $51 million. That's a pretty big ad. Also signed Javon Hargrave, 2 years, $30 million. So really bolstering the inside of their defensive line. Again, never a bad thing. Also signed Isaiah Rodgers, just another player off the Eagles gone. I was never a big fan of Isaiah Rodgers. I thought a lot of the times last year, whenever he was in at nickel, he was kind of getting cooked. But, I mean, he showed up in that playoff run, so credit to him. Nothing else too crazy out of them. Falcons don't do too much either. Cordero Hodge, Jake Matthews, which is a great offensive line signing. Bring him back. Panthers signed Rico Dowdle. That's for them losing Miles Sanders. Again, I think they're kind of a similar player, so I don't think that swap necessarily between them and the Cowboys is nothing really crazy for either team. Obviously, they're hoping, what's his name? Jonathan Brooks, who was hurt all of last year. They're hoping he can obviously make an impact for them. What's nothing else really re-signed Tom. Oh, biggest notable thing for them is they agree to a 4-year extension with J.C. Horn. I think J.C. Horn the past couple years since he's been drafted has been one of the most underrated, best cornerbacks in the entire league. I think nobody really talks about him because he was hurt for a little bit and he's in Carolina. So nobody really wants to talk Carolina, especially when that defense is giving up 35 points a game. But again, I don't think that's much of his doing. I think that's more coordinating and personnel wise, but J.C. Horn's always playing his role to a high level. Saints, again, I do not know what the Saints are doing. The Saints are just stuck in the mud, it seems like. Juwan Johnson re-signed 3 years, over $30 million. That's a lot of money for Juwan Johnson, in my opinion. Nobody else really of notable. Oh, Cam Jordan coming back. Obviously, he's been great for such a long time. He's one of the best veterans in the league. Got to give nothing but respect to Cam Jordan. Also, bring back Chase Young. Chase Young is better in college than he was in the NFL. He's just making money strictly off aura at this point. Also bring in Justin Reed. Obviously, Justin Reed's a really solid player on the Chiefs, but again, it's nothing too crazy. I just think, but there's not too much the Saints can do, so can't really blame them. Bucks bring back Godwin, 3 years, $66 million. That's great. Signed Sterling Shepard. The infamous boat picture still haunts him and the Giants to this day. They bring in Hassan Reddick, 1 year, $14 million. Reddick, man, should have just stayed on the Eagles. Reddick's obviously been bouncing around a little bit. He played on the Jets, didn't have too much of an impact. And now we'll try his luck in Tampa Bay. Bring back Levante David for another year. Moving on to the NFC West, they bring in Jacoby Brissett, the Cardinals, rather, should I say. They signed Josh Sweat is their most notable addition. 4 years, $76.5 million. I love Josh Sweat. I'm really happy for him. He's obviously made his mark in Philadelphia over the past couple of years and was phenomenal in that Super Bowl. But again, am I okay with parting with Sweat? Yes. Did I want to? No. Obviously, in my mind, I would rather just keep everybody. But that's not how it works. So shout out Josh Sweat for going out there, performing great, getting his bag. Rams, bring back Jimmy, bring back Stafford, bring in Devontae Adams, obviously, is their most notable signing. Everybody saw that Puka gave up his number to Devontae. I think they're going to be a really solid duo. I think Devontae, again, his best years are behind him, but I don't think, as much as people thought that him and Aaron are such a great duo, I don't think playing with Aaron at this stage of his career in New York was the best thing for him. I still think Devontae has more left in the tank than Aaron, and I think he'll definitely prove that this year, especially being paired alongside another great route runner and like gadget guy. I think the Rams will use him in a great way and definitely scheme him and Cup open a lot, or not Cup, Puka a lot. 49ers signed Mac Jones. Who cares? Bring back Kyle Juszczyk. Who cares? Nothing else much of note. 49ers lost a lot of players, didn't bring in a lot of talent. Seahawks really interesting. Signed Sam Darnold over $100 million, $55 million guaranteed. Again, I'm not sure what Seattle's plan is. They kind of just out of nowhere seemingly just like blown up their team with Lockett being gone, DK being gone, trading away Geno. It's kind of just now JSN or bust. But I'm not sure. I guess they're not going quarterback at all this year. I was of belief with a lot of other people that they were looking at Jackson Dart a lot. I think Dart could be really solid there, especially paired up with Jackson Smith-Njigba. But again, unless they get him really later on with not a big investment, I don't see them going quarterback anymore. Because again, you signed Arnold to $100 million. You're expecting that to be your guy, at least for a little bit. They also bring in Cooper Kupp, who I just mistakenly said was still on the Rams. Incorrect. He's now on one of their rivals. He's on Seattle. 3 years, $45 million. Obviously, Kupp in that Super Bowl winning year had one of, if not the greatest wide receiver season ever. Triple Crown winner, absolute beast, touchdown in the Super Bowl. But again, injuries have really derailed his peak status. Do I think Kupp's still a really good receiver? Yeah. But do I think he's ever returning back to that form of Triple Crown winner, Super Bowl champion? No. They also signed DeMarcus Lawrence. If anybody saw the beef was going on with him and Micah, you got to love it. You got to just love whenever there's turmoil down there in Jerry World. But again, overall, pretty solid free agency out of them. But yeah, overall, that's just the rest of the NFL quickly. Finally, I just wanted to talk a little college hoops, a little March Madness. I don't watch too much college ball throughout the year. Obviously, once it gets time in March, it's obviously time to lock in. I'm just looking at the bracket here. My early predictions, I'm a big fan of Maryland this year. I think they play a great brand of basketball. Obviously, a lot of people are on Florida this year, even though I do think Florida's good. I'm not rocking with them too heavy just because that's the common pick right now. And I feel like March Madness is all about having fun. You got to have your Cinderellas. I feel like it's boring just to have a 1 seed winning. But I know there was a lot of controversy about UNC getting in over teams like West Virginia and Indiana. I forget what the story is on that. I think one of the people on the board is like the athletic director or commissioner or something at North Carolina. So obviously there's a little something going on there for sure. But again, it should really be a great March Madness. SEC obviously got the most bids, then the Big Ten. That's just how it's going to go from now on. It seems like they're really trying to just make the Big Ten and SEC the two main conferences in college. But again, that's a conversation for another day. These games should kick off in the next 2 days. Should be obviously a great time as it is always. Again, I'm just looking at this real quick. I can't rock with Auburn. I'm not going to lie. I'll just give you some teams that I like from at least my little bit of watching college basketball this year. Michigan, Louisville, obviously Iowa State has always been good these past couple of years. Michigan State also really good. College basketball is just better when Michigan and Michigan State are good. Florida, like I said, UConn is an 8 seed that I'm not going to lie. nobody would really want to see, especially if they beat Oklahoma and face off against Florida. I'm not saying Florida's like shaking in their boots or anything, but you don't want to draw UConn at any point, really. Maryland, again, I'm a big fan of. I have them winning my main bracket. St. John's, obviously, great story. Duke, Cooper Flag, it's all going to depend on his health. If he's healthy throughout this entire March Madness run, I don't think anybody will be surprised if Duke's cutting down the nets in the next month or two. Arizona, I can't get behind. Alabama's obviously great. The one time, or I watched them a couple times this year, and one of them was that loss to Auburn, so obviously that stung. But again, Auburn's a great team. Alabama's a great team. I also really like Clemson this year. I love the way Clemson plays, and I really do think that if they're hitting their threes and they're offensive rebounding like they can, it's going to be they're a hard out for any other team. Tennessee too. Tennessee's been playing great ball, but again, yeah, this isn't usually a college basketball centric pod, and I don't tap too much into that. But obviously, March Madness is one of the best times of the year. It's one of the best sporting events of the year, best sporting event of all time. So yeah, it should be a good little bit of basketball here. Obviously, we're nearing the end of the NBA season, so this will kind of get us through into the playoffs. So yeah, I'm really excited to tap into March Madness, baby. Let's go. So yeah, that's it for this pod. I really appreciate you guys tuning in. Got to talk a little bit of NFL free agency, a little bit of March Madness. Again, I'm going to try and hop on here a little bit more often to try and keep these more weekly or bi-weekly. But if there's any big events going on in the sports world, I'll hop on here and talk to you guys about it. So yeah, peace.